Hello, everybody. Once again, I am Rick, and once again, this is Paul. How are you doing today, Paul?
Hey, mate. Lovely.
Good, good. Our guest today is somebody whom I've had the pleasure to meet over at PAX Weekend. With us today is Brandon Blume. How are you doing today, Brandon?
Great. Good to be here, guys.
It's great to have you on. You worked on the music for Mage's Initiation most recently, and you've done the music for Serena, the AGDI, King's Quest III Redux, and Space Quest II remake by Infamous Adventures.
That's right. Well, I wasn't the sole musician on Serena. I was one of a few people, but I did the main theme, which in my opinion is the most important one. So.
Brandon's like, yeah, mate, I just told you all this before we recorded.
I asked him before so that I could bring it up on the show.
Well, they do the same thing on like talk shows, right? They do pre-interviews before the air.
I would think so. Apparently, this is news to Paul. Paul's like, why are you asking him again? You already asked him before we were recording.
The people didn't hear us.
And currently you're working on Summer Daze with the Coles.
Yes. Most recently, they just announced that on my birthday, actually, which was pretty exciting for me.
Pretty that's
good birthday present.
Yeah, no kidding. So
October 4th.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
So obviously, music, video game music is your thing. Did you do music outside of video games?
Yeah.
I know that's a stupid question, but I'm just sort of trying to lead into something talk about.
No, yeah. I was okay. Well, might as well start from the beginning, I guess. I used to fool around on my mother's Realistic. That's the Radio Shack brand back in the day. Do you still have Radio Shack? Is Radio Shack still in the States? Is it still the Realistic brand?
I don't think the stores are here anymore.
I haven't even seen a Radio Shack in the longest time.
None at all. No, they're gone in Canada. They're all replaced with the Source now.
Yeah, that's right. And the Source, which is like 10 times worse.
Yeah, nobody knows anything.
We do have Circuit City, though.
Yeah, that's the Source, and the Source is called the Source by Circuit City here in Canada. They bought out all the Radio Shacks. And their brand is Nextech now, which is garbage.
Oh God, yeah, no.
Anything Nextech, avoid like the plague. But anyway, back then we had Realistic from Radio Shack, so I had an old Realistic keyboard, or my mom did, and I used to just fool around on it all the time. And actually, from playing games like Space Quest and King's Quest, I tried to learn them on the piano, and I figured them out by myself. And then so my mom put me in piano lessons, which was a big mistake. I hated it. Hated it.
Oh, really?
And I don't know. I just couldn't. I guess I just couldn't be taught from a formula. I had to just figure it out myself. Even years later, I tried to take some guitar lessons, like just a few years ago, actually. And because I've just never had lessons, and there were some blanks I wanted to fill in, and just see if there was anything I could get out of it. And I lasted a month and stopped. So I just had to do it myself, I guess. So I hated piano lessons, so that kind of soured music for me a little bit. But, I kept fooling around on my mom's keyboard. Eventually wrote this little medley that mixed the themes for, what was it? It would like start with Jean-Michel Jarre's Equinox, and then it would move into Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and then the Superman theme, and then somehow I fit Star Wars in there, and then a King's Quest and Space Quest, and I had this whole medley I'd play every time.
Nice.
And then years later, I started playing drums in our church, and so really that was my first real instrument. Like I was just fooling around on the keyboard, figuring stuff out, but I didn't actually play, But drums would be my first real instrument, I guess. And then a few years later, a friend of mine got an electric guitar for his birthday, and so I'd go over and we'd just jam on it, and then we'd go record some songs at the church, and we'd switch off playing drums and guitar and record ourselves. And I still have the recordings, actually. It's really fun to listen to, look back on now. And eventually he just stopped playing it, and then my birthday came around, his mother gave it to me. So that's where my
nice.
Guitar playing started, and I just slammed that thing, practicing all the time, songs that I knew and I loved, and I started. There's so many facets to this. My first experience in composing music was actually mod tracking. So stuff like Amiga music, you know the game Crusader No Remorse?
Yes. Right.
That's all
Absolutely.
mod track music. And
Right.
that was a huge part of my inspiration, actually, was Necros, Andrew Sega's work on Crusader No Remorse. And then Unreal and Unreal Tournament were all mod music. And I actually still have an account on modarchive.com with like a handful of songs that I wrote that are really old.
Oh, nice.
Still there. And so that evolved into working with MIDI, and then I started trying to write stuff in MIDI, which was horrible, but it's all just learning. Eventually I found AGDI, then called Tierra Entertainment, before they had to change their name. Yeah, it's interesting that people kind of, I even forget it a lot of the time, but it's like, yeah, they used to be called Tierra. That was what they were known as. And they only changed when they made that deal with Activision. Was it Activision? No, it was Vivendi at the time. And got a license to do the remakes, and they had to change the name. That was one of the stipulations because it sounded too close to Sierra, and they didn't want to be mistaken for actually Sierra.
Right.
So they changed it to Anonymous Game Developers Interactive. Anyway, before that, I found King's Quest 1 through Quest Studios, Tom Lewandowski's site, he had all the Sierra soundtracks up there for download in MIDI form and for multiple different synths and digitally and everything. And then I found on his site that King's Quest 1 VGA existed, and I was freaking out because all of the Sierra remakes that they made, Space Quest and Police Quest, they're all in VGA except for King's Quest 1. I'm like, that's the only one that didn't make it. And then I found that
got made
fans
into
actually,
the EGA SCI, like the last generation of text parser.
Yeah, just before they left EGA SCI.
Mm-hmm.
That, and I think it was King's Quest 1 and then Quest for Glory 2 were the last ones, and then they went King's Quest 5 VGA. And so I found that place, and I, freaking out, and they had announced King's Quest 2 VGA, and I'm like, this is great. This is, all the games are going to get remade finally, and I really loved the quality. And so we're all waiting for a couple of years for King's Quest 2 to come out, and it finally did. And, we all had a blast. And then this one guy, he called himself Navy Nuke on the forums, whose name is Sean Nichols in real life, who I just met a couple of years ago for the first time, and when we drove down to visit my brother in Texas. He posted a thread saying that he was going to start his own little King's Quest 3 remake, and he was just programming the original game basically in AGS, Adventure Game Studio, which Tierra AGDI did King's Quest 1 and 2 in. And so he was just, if anyone wants to help, and he just used the original EGA graphics, but it was basically point and click. And I still have those really old demo builds, actually.
Mm.
And I said, yeah, I'd love to do the music. And then this other guy came and said he'd love to do some graphics. And basically what he did was trace the AGI. He took the EGA original graphics backgrounds and just kind of did a VGA pass over them. So it was still the same lines and everything, blocky lines, but it was all in 250, not 256 colors, but VGA-ish.
Yeah.
It's actually 16 million colors or whatever, but made it look VGA. And so we put together a little demo, and then eventually the graphics artist, I'm blanking on his name right now, but his forum handle was Muslak Ufme. I have no idea what it means, but that was his name, and I can't forget it now.
He's the machine.
Yeah. So he said, I tried my hand at, and he kind of did some digital art, drawing the mansion scene outside for the introduction sequence of King's Quest 3.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of drew the mansion a little bigger and said, I was trying my hand with this to see what it'd be like. And so he said, yeah. So we did an introduction demo of that. And then Chris Warren, AGD2, who he was called back then, we didn't know his name because he was anonymous, but now he's not. The head of Himalaya, head of AGDI. he posted in our thread and said, "Hey, we've got an idea. We're currently got our hands full with Quest for Glory 2 VGA. What if we took this project and made it our King's Quest 3 VGA?" And then Daniel Stacey, the writer for King's Quest 2 Plus, he can write the script and everything, and you guys, and well, he said you can program it, but I think he wanted to screen everybody first. He just really wanted Sean, first of all, Navy Nuke, to program it and head the project, and anyone else who would be involved would come on later type of thing. And so Muzzlak and I wouldn't be taken on. So we finished our little demo and released it, and then I thought that was it. I'm like, yeah, this is pretty fun, and we had some good response from that demo, and I still have that too somewhere. And I wrote a little kind of an original overture based on the music from King's Quest 3, expanded a bit and developed it, and people really liked it, and then I thought that was it. And then a year later, Navy Nuke private messages me and says, "Are you still interested in working on King's Quest 3?" And I said, yes. And he said, "There's just one stipulation. You've got to sign away all your work." Right. And I'm like, oh, okay. So still, I'm like, heck yes. And so he couldn't tell me more until I agreed. And then, so once I agreed, and he said, "You can't tell anybody, obviously." This was back in 2000. I don't even remember when this was. Probably 2004, 2005. So he contacted me and said, "Do you still want to do the music?" And I said, yes. So he told me that the reason I had to sign everything away was because AGDI, which I had noticed before he contacted me that they changed their name from Tierra Entertainment to AGDI. He said, the only thing is you have to sign away your work because we've reached a license agreement with Vivendi, Universal, who then owned Sierra and the IPs. And we can work on it and release it for free, but only from our website, and we can't own anything we do. We all had to sign contracts and mail them off and everything. So I said yes, and then a number of years later, I think it was 2011, we finally released the darn thing, and we kept it a secret the whole time. It was wow. So people were pretty surprised, but it was like 6 years of being in development. It was way too long.
Yeah,
but it was free.
Yeah,
and so after that, Chris came to me later and said, "You interested in doing the music for Mage's Initiation, this new game we were going to do?" I'm like, yes. He said, because, well, Tom had done Al Emo, which was Al Emo and the Lost Dutchman's Mine, which was Himalaya Studios' first commercial game, and he wasn't available to do Mage's. So he asked me to do it, and I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. So that was like 8.5 years for me. It was another long development time cycle, but that finally got out just this February, so that was exciting. You know what's interesting too is when I first signed the contract to do Mages, I used the money from the contract to buy myself a new studio computer to record the music, and I got some proper, some good, because what I'd been using before was a Sound Canvas and an MT32, and that was it. So I bought this studio computer with a good orchestra library, not the best, but the decent one. And I did all the music. And then the very last thing I did with the computer was mix and master the digital and CD soundtrack for Mage's Initiation. And as soon as I finished, like 2 weeks later, my computer died. So right from as soon as I got it to as soon as I finished, it like served its purpose. 8.5, 9 years, died.
Died with
wow,
honor.
that's timing.
Yeah. But died, but you didn't lose your work though. Hopefully,
no, it's the motherboard won't post anymore. So if I get a new motherboard, it'll work, but I haven't been able to replace it yet. But I just thought it was kind of funny, poetic.
Yeah. And
I've been involved in some bands outside of game music too. I worked with a hip hop group of all things. A few years ago, and we released an EP and then an album, and then I left them from time constraints, and I've only just recently joined a metal band, so I'm all over the place. Metal band called Crown the Broken. If you want to look it up, we have a single on Spotify and iTunes and everywhere.
Nice.
Awesome. Let's check it. What instruments are you playing in the bands? Like with the metal one anyway, and then the hip hop. Were they both guitar?
Yeah, well, the hip hop one we were called Edify because that was the guy's stage name. And well, okay, I'll back up again. At first we were called the Free Agency, and it was just two guys who were both rappers, and they had a producer make all their music for them. And then they wanted to do a CD release party. I think this was in 2008, Christmas of 2008, around Christmas time, they wanted to do a CD release party. So they asked me to play guitar for them. And as we practiced, I kind of organically became the music director for the whole show. And because I had all these ideas, like, we could do this. And so they just listened to me. So we, not all of the songs we played live, but the ones we did, I kind of changed them up a bit and added more guitars. And so after that, we were working on our next album, and we were a 7-piece band by that point. So 2 rappers, a female singer, and then my guitar, a drummer, a bassist, and a keyboardist. And we all ended up, 7-piece band, we all ended up wanting different things, and we ended up going our separate ways because we couldn't agree on very much. But it's still a fun time. And so then it was just me and one of the other rappers who were in the end were remaining. And so me and him wrote all the music ourselves, and I wrote some and he wrote some, and he wrote all the lyrics, and I'd play guitar in some parts, and then I even put backing vocals in some parts. And then I had to leave for time constraints. And so I was, when we did play live, I played guitar, and but I was basically performing a lot of things, from sequencing to playing, MIDI keyboard for hip hop,
Yeah, running over it. I think I'd have a lot of fun with the hip hop group. I've taken a heavy influence from Tom Morello, so I really enjoy, sneaking guitar and stuff like that into any sort of funk.
Yeah, I definitely went in with an ulterior motive to try to move away from just straight. It was like, I don't know the terms, but I think it was like, like Southern hip hop, and then some East Coast in there a little bit, whatever that means. I'm not up on the terminology.
I'm just going to imagine Ludacris and go with it.
So I went in with ulterior motives to kind of broaden when there was just the 2 of us left. His name was Alex. To broaden Alex's horizons a bit and try to push for a little bit more interesting music-wise, and we ended up going more of an electronic pop route, which was really cool. He still rapped and everything, but then he also started singing, and so we kind of went in an interesting direction. All this stuff you can find on my website, brandonblume.com. I have a history of all the stuff I worked on, and there's some examples and links to everything I did, including Edify.
Got Space Quest 2 soundtrack from there a couple months ago, I recall.
Yes, I put that up there too. Soundtrack A. Again, I was only one of 3 people who did Space Quest 2 with Infamous Adventures. I guess it's the first time I'm telling the audience. I told you before the interview. But, yeah, I was one of 3 who worked on Space Quest 2. And what happened was, I'm jumping all over the place, but now I'm going to talk about Space Quest 2.
All right. Awesome.
They asked me to join them in the middle of working on King's Quest 3, and obviously they didn't know I was working on King's Quest 3 because it was a locked-up secret. So I was working on 2 projects at once, and it kind of stretched me a little bit thin for a little while there, and so I was the only composer for a while. And then there was a period for about 4 or 5 months, where I actually moved out. I moved out and got married, and lived in a house without internet for like 5 months. So I didn't have any connection to the team, and I told them ahead of time, but they had to do what they had to do, and they went with they got another guy whose name is Isaac Lundgren to work on some music too. I had already made some music at that point, and he came on and worked on some others. And then I got my internet back finally, and so they didn't kick me out or anything, so we just started working together. So they decided to do was have me take all the space location themes, and he would take all the themes on Labion, and then we kind of had this interesting dichotomy where I do like electronic music, like from the MT32, and a little bit of Propellerhead Reason for the space themes, and he would do more orchestral sounding themes on Labion, and I thought that worked out pretty good. And then as time went on, we also brought on board James Mulvale, and he did a handful of tracks. So the three of us kind of have three soundtracks separately for our games. Mine's soundtrack A, James Mulvale's soundtrack B, and Isaac did soundtrack C. I don't know if that's available anywhere. I know he had it for streaming on a website somewhere, but...
Well, that's good to know, because I was gonna ask you like off mic or message you and tell me which songs that I've been listening to were your songs, but now I know all of album A was, so that
yeah,
actually
all of album A was me, and I had written some tracks for Le Beyond too, actually, but when we decided to split them up, and Isaac wrote some for some space scenes too, but when we decided to split it up, I sacrificed those themes and he sacrificed a couple, and we just took our locations and it worked out pretty good. But I did put the ones I worked on as bonus tracks on soundtrack A, so you can still listen to them. Also included on that soundtrack, because it's accessible in the game with the super hidden secret Easter egg, is the hidden Infamous Adventures bar, and a bunch of us are on stage in the bar, and I'm playing my Space Quest 4 Metal Remix medley, which
nice.
is another thing that I did over the years.
Nice.
I feel like, have I heard that on Backseat Designers, like when you were on with Trolls?
Yes. In fact, he had a few episodes geared directly towards that, so he'd take the pieces of the medley that I made, he'd play it, and then he'd play the original, and then he'd have me talk about how I worked about recording it in metal, and then he had Ken Allen, the original composer, talk about how he originally composed the original. So he had that on for a few episodes, actually, which was pretty neat. I thought that was brilliant. It's really cool to be on with him, Ken Allen, too.
Mm-hmm. Are there any specific games that you take a lot of inspiration from?
Musically, or?
Musically.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, I started to keep a list for Mage's Initiation, because as I was composing, there was a bunch of songs that came to my mind that either I knew ahead of time or I realized after I was inspired from, and I started to make a list of them. And I have the list here. I'm going to read them off. So, Mage's Initiation, a handful of themes. I don't remember which all of the themes were inspired by what, but the stuff that I was inspired by, King's Quest 2 Plus. I was even inspired by my own King's Quest 3 Redux music. King's
Nice.
Quest 5, Quest for Glory 1, Quest for Glory 5, Police Quest 1 VGA, Conquest of Camelot, Monkey Island 2, Fate of Atlantis, Indiana Jones, Prisoner of Ice, which is a Call of Cthulhu adventure game, Thexter 2, Warcraft 2, Morrowind, Skyrim, Zelda Wind Waker, Rise of the Triad, Duke Nukem 3D. The X-Files theme was an inspiration at some point.
Rise of the Triad. I never... that just strikes me because I never heard anyone ever... I love that game. I just never heard anyone talk about it musically.
Yeah, well, I always loved the soundtrack. Lee Jackson wrote the music for that game. It's all very, 80s... I don't even know how to describe it. Lots of, brass rock or something.
Yeah.
Electronic rock. It was very 80s to me, and I loved it. So something about that inspired. Doom, there was one track that was inspired by Doom, believe it or not, Duke Nukem. But my biggest musical inspiration overall is Mike Oldfield, who is a virtuoso musician but guitarist mainly. He wrote Tubular Bells in 1973, which launched Virgin Records, incidentally, and was also used as the soundtrack for The Exorcist. He was my main inspiration for years. I listened to him even before I started playing guitar, but it was probably because of him that I started playing guitar in the first place. And it would be his music that I practiced for hours and hours every day to learn. So he's my number one influence. And I've got all of his albums. I've got a whole guitar-shaped CD rack with all of his albums in it. He's my idol. He's my musical idol.
Yeah.
And other things like Jean Michael Jarre and Tangerine Dream, and then on the metal side, there's a Danish guy named Arjen Lucassen who created a whole bunch of musical projects. One is a rock opera concept album series called Arion, and then he did some others called Guilt Machine and Stream of Passion, and he's kind of just all over the place, and I love all of his work. Absolutely love all of it. And then there's another metal band that I discovered that I fell in love with called Pagan's Mind from Norway. And they do sci-fi concept albums about Stargate. And the music is just incredible. I love it. Dream Theater. I love Dream Theater. And then film soundtracks. I really love composers like, John Williams. My favorite, I think, would be Jerry Goldsmith. Especially his Star Trek V score, The Final Frontier. That's like the most beautiful music I've ever heard.
Right.
Well, I'm all over the place. And obviously game soundtrack composers like Ken Allen and Mark Siebert and Chris Brayman, who did King's Quest VI and Quest for Glory 2. And the LucasArts side, Michael Zeland did Monkey Island. I mostly listened to instrumental music growing up instead of the radio. So I just grown to appreciate instrumental music more, and I think that's probably helped me. And after playing games for so long for the music, I think that's what I loved about. If I really loved a game when I was a kid, chances are it was because of the music, even if it was a terrible game.
Right. The
music was so good it drew me in, and so that's why.
That's really cool. That's
I don't know what the original question was, but I hope I answered it.
Somewhere in there. Originally, the question was which video game soundtracks inspired you musically.
Yeah,
but
okay.
I guess
a whole bunch.
Yeah. In extension to that, if the answer is in any way different or altered, do you have any specific favorite video game soundtracks? Is there a particular?
Oh, yeah.
I know you've mentioned quite a few there, but is there what would you say are your top three?
Top three, Space Quest 4. Without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Top three.
I know it can be. It's like picking your favorite child.
Okay. Doom 2016. I love that soundtrack.
Okay.
And I guess I have to go with Zelda Twilight Princess for top three.
Okay.
I think that covers a wide spectrum there.
Well, that's good. It's good to have the variety and depth. So currently you're working on Summer Daze.
Yes. Well, I will be.
You will be.
I've done one theme right now, which they used in the Kickstarter trailer. But I have yet to start. I guess we're kind of waiting for the Kickstarter to the campaign to finalize before we get moving, which will be fun.
Cool. And so the Kickstarter launched. How long is the Kickstarter going to?
The end of the month. When it launched, I think it was the first it launched, and then it said there was 33 days left. So,
right.
Probably right to Halloween or a little after, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And I do notice that you did mention a couple of the Quest for Glory games in amongst your list of musical inspirations.
Yeah.
And of course, the Quest for Glory games were made by the Coles, who are working on Summer Daze. So I noticed you mentioned Quest for Glory 1 and Quest for Glory 5, which is kind of interesting because a lot of people who talk about the Quest for Glory soundtracks definitely name those up there, but they tend to really favor Quest for Glory 4 as a soundtrack. I'm just is that one that just doesn't quite rank as high, or is there anything that you actually do particularly?
That list was specifically for inspirations for themes that I did in Mage's Initiation. So it's not that I didn't like them. And I'll be honest, the Quest for Glory games were never games I actually played very much when I was a kid.
Oh, okay.
Heresy, I know. But the reason is not my fault. My dad bought all our games, and he didn't like RPG. So he never touched Quest for Glory, so I never got a chance to play them. I did years later, and I finished Quest for Glory 1, and I started 2. I didn't get through it, but I have played the beginnings of all of them, and I've listened to the soundtracks as well from Quest Studios. I just put them on a playlist and listen to the whole thing straight through. I love how different the Quest for Glory 4 soundtrack is, and the fact that it's a little more rock oriented, which is a really interesting step compared to the other ones. It was just nothing about it inspired me directly for Mage's Initiation.
Yeah. This wasn't particularly relevant to that particular project.
Well, and it's not like I pick inspirations out of a hat or even directly to be inspired by it. Just my process for recording is very, very organic, and I'll try to come up with something with a certain feel, but most of the time I'm laying down a bunch of themes that I just feel in the moment. Like, I'm just going to record this. And sometimes when I need to come up with a certain type of theme, I'll sit down and I'll be able to I'll be able to do it and something comes to me. But I'm really a slave to my inspiration. If there's no inspiration, I can't work. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of end up working on whatever's in me at the time.
Yeah.
And so like this list was just generated completely randomly from, I don't know, I guess based on my mood at the time. Maybe I was actually playing these games at the time. I don't remember for those specific themes. But yeah, it's very organic. So I don't pick and choose what I'm inspired by. It just kind of happens.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Like there might be something from Quest for Glory 4 that inspires me for Summer Daze. Who knows? Or there might be something from my metal band I'm in. Like
weird, yeah.
There might be something from my metal band. There might be something from the old hip hop stuff. Like it's completely random. At least it seems like it is.
Well, yeah, that's fair. Actually, that's a pretty good way to go about it. If just like sort of whatever strikes you in that moment, as opposed to picking something and deliberately saying that's the one I'm going to work with, right?
Yeah, and like I guess there's merit to the idea of forcing yourself to sit down and work out a certain kind of theme you need. And well, you need to have that if you're doing game music, because unless you're making your own game, you got to follow the direction of the director of the game who wants a specific type of theme. And so I guess I've been able to do that with 2 games, 1 commercial, and now, well, I guess if you count Serena, that's another commercial, but it was free.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So Serena. So how did you get onto that one, and what was that one like working on?
Actually, with that one, there was a bit of. That was around the time that there was a bit of drama going on in the community, and there was various things happening, and some people were. Anyway, it was messy and it was drama. So Augustin from the guy who made Scratches and kickstarted Asylum wanted to put together this free-to-play game, this short kind of one-room short adventure game that was very narrative-based, and he started assembling a team from a bunch of people across the indie adventure game scene. So he took people from all over the place, but who actually approached me was Trolls Plymert, the Space Quest historian. Plug for his YouTube channel. Anyway, Trolls Plymert, he came to me and said, "Do you want to do some music? I'm writing for this game," and he told me all about it and the purpose, and we need a musician. I'm like, "Sure, I'll do it." And so we had the plan to do that around New Year's. So we did release it in January. I think it was 2014 that it came out, and just came out for free in everyone's Steam accounts one day.
Yeah.
And it was really fun because I started doing YouTube searches for it, and all these people were doing Let's Plays, and like, I just got this game on my Steam list, I guess I'll play it. But I ended up, I went on originally going to do all 3 or 4 themes of the game, but then Augustin said, or Augustin, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Augustin or Augustine.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever encountered that name before.
I think he's from somewhere. I don't know where. I don't want to start rhyming off wrong places now. So he had an idea that he had a classical theme that his brother, I think it was, wrote, and so he had this idea, we'll use one theme from different people, and then there are different phases in the game where, as time passes, the mood of the whole game and the atmosphere changes and the narrative changes, and having 3 different composers for the 3 different phases would be interesting. So I took the first theme, which ended up being kind of like the main theme, and his brother, I think, did the 3rd one, which sounds very dark, and someone else did the 2nd one, and I don't remember who. But it was Trolls that brought me onto that, and we went on the Senscape, that's their name, the developers. Mm-hmm. We went on the Senscape forums. There was a hidden forum where all the developers could talk, and so we worked on that for a month or 2, maybe even just a month, and then released it in January, and it was a pretty fun project. I actually scaled down my theme a lot from what it was. When I first wrote it, you can actually find this on my SoundCloud. I called the theme Hazy Awakening, and you can find the original that's in the game on there, and also my early demo version that was not used. It's a lot more electronic and ambient, and it's a little faster, and it's not as classical. And there's some like muffled drums, electronic sound effects in there and stuff. But he said, no, I'm looking for more of a classical feel. So I slowed it right down and added this kind of stabbing piano chords and cellos and violins, and that worked for him. So I guess that's one example of how I can do what people want me to do for them. But So that's on my SoundCloud if anyone wants to check that out. It's interesting to listen to the two of them and hear the difference. It's kind of different. I think they both work, but he obviously wanted a more classical-oriented score, so they're both. It's both really interesting to listen to back to back.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I can't remember if you've already said this. How do we find you on SoundCloud? Do we just look up your name, or is there? Do you have
yeah, you can just look at my name. I think it's I think it's soundcloud.com/musically inspired, which was my forum handle for a long time. Mm-hmm. Except it's musically spelled with MUSICLY instead of CALLY.
Oh, okay.
Because musically ALLY was already taken, I think. But if you search Brandon Blume, it'll come up.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just checking that. Yeah, I'm the top of the list. Winnipeg, Canada.
Awesome. Look for Brandon Blume from Winnipeg.
Or just go to brandonblume.com. I got links to everything on there. YouTube, SoundCloud, whatever.
Oh, that's perfect. That makes things easy.
That makes it easier. Recently, actually, I've been doing a couple small projects for a single developer, indie developer, who just needed some music for his game, made a couple bucks on it. The first thing I did for him, he made a first-person puzzle platformer game for the Build engine, Duke Nukem 3D's engine.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, called Silver Balls with a Z at the end. You can find that on SoundCloud too.
Oh, okay.
I actually released that on iTunes and everything too, because I had some electronic music that I wrote that didn't really have a purpose, and so I said, I've wrote a couple new tracks for him too. There's some specific things he asked for. I'm like, I got these other tracks too. Do you want to use them too? And he's like, yeah, they sound great. So I finally got a chance to release that stuff that I never got a chance to before. And then he did a. Is
that a game that's still in production, or is that that already
out?
It's
out. Yeah, it came out in October-ish.
Is this on Steam, or is it on
it's on itch.io. If you search for Manicware, that's the developer. You can find a couple of his projects. The last one I did for him was called 4 Blocks, and he wanted a mod tracked song actually. So I tracked again for the first time in years, and that's on my SoundCloud too. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a Tetris-like game, except it's all blocks of 4, like a square, and each of the 4 blocks in a square is a different color, and you got to match the colors that way. So they're all squares. So it's called 4 Blocks. It's a fun little game. He asked me to do another one recently, but I'm like, I'm a little busy now with my band and Summer Daze. I can't devote time anymore.
We actually, in case people are wondering why Paul is so quiet, he actually just had to tend to something. We've kind of lost him here. But I think it's just about time to wrap up anyways. Is there anything else? Is there any shout outs or any plugs that you'd like to give at this time? I know you've mentioned already brandonblume.com. It has links to a lot of your works there.
Everything's on brandonblume.com basically. I've got a YouTube channel that's also linked, and my music is on there, but once upon a time I tried to be a YouTuber, so I got some let's plays of The Witness on there, and an old game I tried to do this old game series called Retro Backlog and get through all the games that I've never beaten in my life.
Wow.
I started with Blackthorn, and still haven't beaten it. I haven't finished it.
That's I think most people are kind of like that. I know I've played Blackthorn. I've started Blackthorn a number of times, and it's not a terribly hard game, because I get through. I never really get stuck, but there's always at some point I'll get a little bit further. Yeah, I'll get a little bit further than last time, and then I'll just stop somehow.
Yeah, story of my life basically. And so I tried to play that. I got about 6 episodes in, but what happened was I played The Witness actually right through to the first ending. Anyway, I didn't beat the entire game. And I started playing more, but then I moved back in March this year, and then my computer died, so I couldn't record anymore. So it's just been that for a while. But yeah, well, for me, brandonblume.com. Obviously, check out Transsolar Games, the Coles, who are working on Summer Daze. Check out their Kickstarter and fund that sucker. We're past halfway now. We're just trying to get to that finish line. Mm-hmm. And we got streams lined up every Saturday. They're going to do another stream two more at the time this will be released, I guess. The Halloween stream I'm actually going to be at physically. I'm flying down to California.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to, with Corey Cole's acoustic guitar, I'm going to play a live rendition of Irena's piece.
Oh, beautiful.
So that'll be exciting. And so I'm looking forward to that. Get to meet them in person again. I saw them at PAX. And you, it was great to meet everyone at PAX, by the way. PAX was probably one of the biggest highlights of my life.
Yeah.
Especially since I never thought I'd ever get to be able to go to a convention ever, you know. Yeah, and I really got to give a shout out to Roberta Vaughn, actually, because she's the one that got me down there. She pushed me to go, and it ended up being the greatest thing I ever did. So thank you, Roberta. Shout out to her. Popcorn, Roberta. That's an inside joke.
Yeah. I guess candy corn, Roberta, for my part of that one. So.
Yeah. Candy corn. Candy corn's the best.
Yeah. Oh, it totally is. And
Canadian candy corn, anyway. I don't know about your American candy corn, but
and there's two of us here right now because Paul had to leave. So I think this is enough of a quorum to say that candy corn is unanimously approved of here.
Unanimously, yes, absolutely. I 100% support this message.
Well, it was a great pleasure having you on the show. I hope to have you on again soon. And thank you very much for taking the time to be here. It's been great catching up with you. Anyways, be sure to follow the Classic Gamers Guild. We are a online community on Facebook. We have a page and a group. Just come track us down and join us. And we are also on Twitter if you'd like to follow us at the CG Guild. And we have a Patreon for those of you who want to help support the show. Again, just look for the Classic Gamers Guild. And we're there too. Every dollar counts, and we appreciate all of your support. So thank you all for tuning in. I guess since Paul isn't here with us at the moment, it'll be on me to tell you, don't do a murder.